I know it's a busy time. We're going to give the chairman presenting the bill a couple of minutes to arrive.
Just refuse. They're not going to do it.
You'll read us your LC number in just a second.
No,
All right, well-
2342 SSCS is what I have. So
All
this
right.
is that's some.
We do have that
That's
one.
on there.
Yeah, that's the first one listed. All right, we'll go on and call the meeting to order of the Tax Revision Subcommittee. Thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you.
Glad to work with our
Good to see
Senate
you.
colleagues, and I know we sit on opposite sides of witnessing and running the committee.
That's
Thank you for
right.
your
Yes,
work.
Thank you for what you do, Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead and, if you will, just for everyone, read the version that we're using to discuss today. This will be a hearing to begin with today.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'm reading off of is Senate Bill 516 LC 432342 S as in Sierra, and in brackets SCS Sierra Charlie Sierra. And this is in relation to the Solid Waste Trust Fund. It's a very simple piece of legislation. What happened is between Muskogee County and Harris County, which are within my district, on Highway 27, Miss Martha Berry Highway, there was a contractor had cleared some property. And in clearing the property, if you looked at it any other day of the week, it would just look like a lot of timber and a lot of woods. But as he was clearing it out, what they discovered was large piles of tires that had been abandoned there. And when I drove through this weekend, those tires were still there. I've reached out to a scrap company that a friend of mine has a relationship with, and we're getting a price together to have them come in and pick these tires up. So I went and spoke to several retailers in the tire industry who I'm familiar with and trust, and started talking to them about the $1 fee that they have to pay. And what I discovered fairly quickly was a lot of them were confused about the process. So I went online, looked at the forms that have to be filled out, and I could see where there's could be a little confusion. It's almost like, filing something with the IRS that you're trying to file. And I do want to say this, that EPD has been a part of the conversation since the beginning. They've been extremely professional, extremely accommodating, because at the very beginning, when I started trying to determine how this dollar was collected, what I was finding out was the system was so confusing that your first thought would be, well, EPD's primary role is not collection. That normally falls within the Department of Revenue. So we looked over at the Department of Revenue and looked at the infrastructure that EPD had built, and realized that EPD had done a really good job of building a dashboard online that helps collect this money if the retailers understand the process. But what I discovered talking to the retailers, many of them don't understand the process. And in talking to the retailers, I discovered there are thousands and thousands of tire retailers in Georgia that should be complying with the $1 fee per tire. And also in those conversations, what I discovered is these retailers didn't know if they were supposed to pay it, if the scrapper that they had contracted with was supposed to pay it, or how it was supposed to be paid. And I discovered that there are less than 100 distributors in Georgia, wholesalers, who provide the tires. And so what it seemed like fairly quickly in the process was that we would do a much better job in collecting this $1 if we directed our energies toward the distributor to pay the $1 as opposed to the retailer themselves. And of course, we know those in business, the dollar eventually is going to come from the consumer because that dollar is going to be factored into the margin from the wholesaler, from the distributor to the retailer, and from the retailer to that man or woman who purchases the tire. And some of the math and the conversations we were having where reducing the number of points of collection, we feel comfortably that there's an opportunity to pick up approximately 3 to 5 million additional dollars that are being left on the table today. And those monies can be used to continue the program within EPD of not only abating the tires, but also of managing the abandoned landfills that they're responsible for and some of the other tasks that they're responsible for. And throughout the conversation, one of the more controversial things that we came up with is we wanted more innovative ideas of what to do when we collect these tires and everything, because we certainly don't want to pile them all up into tire piles, which we have several of those around the state that have thousands of tires in them. Should one of these tire piles catch on fire, we're talking about a public safety incident that would probably last months. I think we've seen it around the country where these large collections of tires have been ignited for whatever reason and caused some serious issues, not only from the fire standpoint, from public health standpoints also. So in collecting all this information, talking to individuals from the industry, we decided to, I think you'll see it online. Let's see. On line 15, it says, it is the intent of the General Assembly that 10% of all funds transferred or appropriated to the Solid Waste Trust Fund, except funds deposited in accordance with paragraph 1 of subsection E of this code section, should be used to make grants and loans to counties, municipalities, and public schools that apply for tire-related projects pursuant to code section 12.837. For the 37.1, for the implementation of innovative technologies for the recycling and reuse of scrap tires. To the greatest extent practical, scrap tire-related activity expenditures should be directed towards scrap tire generation from the state of Georgia. In my district and in the district of Chairman Vance Smith, we have something called the Ray, which is a solar stretch of highway. And we have a lot of innovative technologies within there. And I guess it would be over by Representative Buckner's area there too now. But they've used a lot of innovation on asphalt roads, solar highways, reflectors in the road, electric vehicles, and a lot of other really innovative things. And we thought that bringing in solid support for municipalities, cities, and public school systems to come up with more innovative ideas to deal with litter abatement, scrap tire abatement, and other things would be beneficial. And that is probably the only real controversial part of this legislation that I've run into so far. But I'd be happy to answer any questions or that the committee may have.
Thank you. Just for the future reference, is someone from both EPD and DOR here? DOR? How about EPD? Okay, because I know you raised a couple of
early
issues.
on, DOR tapped out, and we agreed with them 100%. The infrastructure that EPD has developed is very practical and functional, and for DOR to do that, it would take it's heavy lifting. And as we know, with the importance of DOR, they're focusing on their mission right now. So I think this at this time would be somewhat of a distraction to ask them to build an infrastructure that already exists within EPD.
And right now, my understanding is this is the first year our truth and fees amendment goes into effect beginning this July. Is that my understanding? And therefore, the amount, instead of an appropriation, the amount coming in may be significantly higher than the previous appropriations. So did you have Chairman Smith? Chairman Ridge.
Thank you, Chairman. In reading the first line of your bill, or actually not the first, line 15, line 16, except funds deposited in accordance with paragraph 1 of subsection E of this code section. Do you have that with you? That apparently, that seems to, That seems to be a new code section, and I cannot find it without logging into my Lexis account.
You know, I don't have it with me. If someone's here from the EPD, I think they can testify to it as to what it does, but basically it gives them a leeway on grants and other types of funding that they're able to use to help communities with grants and abatements. I
Grants
believe.
EPD receives or they issue?
Grants that they issue,
Okay.
right.
So you're saying paragraph 1 of subsection E, is there someone who can,
I
Address
believe that's
that.
correct. Let's see.
or legislative council?
Okay, I stand corrected. It deals with landfill fines. What right now, EPD is responsible for several abandoned landfills around the state of Georgia. A lot of these are inert landfills, but the actual fines and fees on these usually average somewhere around $250. So there's really not a lot of funds coming in that way. But their role in that is not only to maintain and protect these landfills, but to eventually clean them out and try to get the land back to as close to natural as possible. And many times it's almost impossible to find who the individuals are that created these problems.
So I understand you said that the most controversial provision of this bill is subsection F1.
That's where I've received most feedback. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And subsection F2, you haven't really received any criticism or pushback?
I never received criticism, but I just received a whole lot of pushback. Which part of section 2?
Yeah, F2. Because it
It's a
seems,
You're
report,
talking about section, I'm sorry.
line 23.
yeah, line 23 through 29.
Oh, paragraph 2. I apologize.
Yeah,
I was
I'm sorry.
looking down further. The director shall what we did is at the beginning, we had multiple years in there, but because of the pandemic and because of something that Chair Newton referred to as this being really the first opportunity for us to get some good data points, we amended that to fiscal year 2023, which alleviated a lot of problems. This legislation passed out of committee over in the Senate and out of the Senate unanimously. And the reason being is in committee over there, we did do some work with some of those who were concerned about asking them to use data points during the pandemic, which may not give us exactly the exact correct type of reading we're looking for. But
Well, I mean, I see that the data points would begin being reported in fiscal year 2023, but so that is new that they will, that this is not provided for in current law, that they have to report by category of expenditure.
That's correct on this particular category of expenditure. Yes, ma'am. What we want to do is we want to see exactly, my intent is that we're able to look at and see where exactly this money is being spent. I think when the constitutional amendment was proposed, the vast majority of the conversation around that was that so much of monies that were earmarked, whether it was fines and fees in courts, whether it was the $1 tire, everything, were basically going into the general fund and going into areas where they were not intended. We were finding fees that were supposed to be used for driving schools were being used for things so far
Right.
removed from that. So I think.
Yeah,
right-
that, I mean, that is kind of a we've already done that. We've already said that the money has to be, when it's collected for a certain purpose now,
Right.
it has to be spent on that. I guess we did that last year or the year before.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is new though, that now we want the EPD to report exactly how they spend the money on which categories.
Correct. And-
That's the thrust. So I don't know that I have an issue with that either. I still have a question about why we would suggest that EPD should spend 10% of those funds on one of those categories. Why is this innovation category or this grant category, why is it superior to the other categories that the money is spent for?
Well, I think past record shows that probably the one body that has the biggest difficulty coming up with great ideas and innovative ideas is housed under the roof of this building here. I think the strength lies within the local communities, the municipalities, our public school system, where our new minds are coming out, and we're finding that the environment and keeping Georgia a healthy state to live in our trees, our dirt and everything else. I think our energy is going to come from the local level. And what I would not want is for the local folks not to be available or not to have the funds available to come up with innovative ideas, not only addressing the abatement of tires, but also other litter abatement programs and other type of programs that I think would create robust communities throughout Georgia.
I have, the chairman just showed me a report. It looks like it's a report. Is this of the EPD? Where they
EPD
already,
Solid waste report.
so they already are
There's a
actually
type
reporting
of-
on their expenditures by category, it looks like. Is that,
That's correct.
okay. Okay.
Yes,
Thank you.
that's correct. And what we're looking for on here is, if you look on 28, it said the director shall annually report such proportions to the Speaker of the House, Representative, and President of the Senate. With this fund being as new as the chairman mentioned it would be, I just think it would be extremely positive for us to have as much information as we could have to make sure that we're using this money as efficiently and properly as we move into a new frontier when it comes to having this amount of money to manage this big of a problem. And I do want to point out, this problem is going to get a whole lot bigger. With Rivian and others moving here to the state, you'll find that electric vehicles burn through tires much faster than gasoline powered engines because of RPMs and other reasons. They just run a lot hotter. And so I think what we're going to find is our issues related to tire abatement are only going to increase moving forward with these new innovative technologies coming to our state.
So do we know already, I'm so sorry,
No,
may
go
I ask
ahead.
one more question? Do we know already these other categories are waste reduction and litter, education, operations and fund management, abandoned landfills, scrap tire management and abatement? Do we know whether these areas are being fully funded by what we're collecting? I mean, are we going to be cutting them short by giving 10% to one of these categories?
Do we want EPD to try to speak to this, or are they willing to in a moment? Or unless you want to. Mr.
Well, I
Chairman.
could just real quick, what my opinion is, I think by taking it away from the 10,000 points of light we were talking about before and reducing it down to the less than 100 distributors, what we're going to find out is that the dollar fees that we collect are actually going to go up. So the 10% that we see today will be a much larger piece of the pie moving forward as our collections increase.
Thank you.
I got a couple more with questions for the author, Secretary Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator, for bringing the measure. I'm just trying to get my mind around this, how this new tax collection system would work. I'm assuming this is analogous to the oil jobbers that collect excess taxes.
You're on section 3 now, right? The $1.
I'm dropping down to section 3.
Right. Okay. Thank you, sir.
I'm trying to get my mind around the whole distributor aspect of it. So the intent is to make sure that the due and payable taxes are collected at a more efficient level of the distribution of these tires throughout the state of Georgia. Am I
Yes, sir.
correct there?
Yes, sir.
So then I see where you define the term distributor means any person that produces or manufactures new replacement tires in this state. Would this mean I'm assuming Toyo still manufactures tires up around the Rome area?
I think Pirelli.
Or Pirelli or
Yes, sir.
somebody does.
Yes, sir.
Is that every tire they sell out of that factory going to have a $1? By definition, they're distributed there.
Every tire they sell out of that factory to a Georgia retailer would
Okay.
have the $1. Yes, sir.
All right. Now, so how would these, you said approximately 100 distributors, are they going to have to register?
There's
as
a
distributors?
there's a process, and the EPD has a long list, and I have it of certified tire carriers and scrappers and others. So what the distributors would do is they would go onto the EPD website currently and follow the same directions that a retailer normally follows.
Again, I'm new to this discussion.
sir.
I'm just trying to get educated. Maybe EPD, if they do speak to this measure, can help educate me. So right now you're saying that retailers basically have to register with the state.
They go online to the EPD website and they fill out a form,
Okay.
and it's almost like a tax form. Like I said before, how many tires did you sell? Multiply that number by this. If you sold more than this, skip down to section 4 and just, it goes through that way. It's almost an application fill in the blank type process.
And my only hesitation is just from a small business perspective is, are we are we limiting the ability for somebody to get into the tire retailing business or limiting somebody for becoming a distributor in this state? Do they have to go through a permitting process, or is it just simply they're going to fill out, Al's tire replacement company and bring tires in from whomever they buy them from, wherever they're manufactured?
Chairman Williamson, looking at it online, it seemed more like the latter you were discussing, where you would
good.
go on and just fill in the application and send it in. A lot of what I'm finding now is more of an honor system, because I think EPD, and I may be wrong on this number, they have somewhere like maybe 15 individuals employed at maybe less than that, who are responsible for traveling around the state, dealing with these tens of thousands of retailers. And as you and I both know, that's an impossible task for a staff that small to ensure that each and every one of these. And I think that they are much more equipped to manage less than 100.
Again, I'm not against the idea.
No, sir, I
This is my
understand.
understanding. That was the reason we started collecting excise fuel taxes at the
Yes,
distributor level, because there was a lot of non-compliance at the retail level. And it makes sense. I just want to make sure it doesn't hurt
Yes.
somebody's opportunity to.
And that was the model that was discussed in the committee over there. Senator Burt Jones brought it up for being in the petroleum industry, said it was
Who's
very,
that?
he's, I think he used to play football at a community college somewhere over near
Oh, now
Athens.
you're on the meddling. No, thank you for answering.
If you could
the
introduce
you,
yourself
sir.
from EPD, since we have come back to that a few times, I'd appreciate it. Could you just introduce yourself and kind of address this question of, does the department feel it's really likely that we're missing significant amounts of money?
Sure. Can y'all hear me? I don't know what. There we go.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Visser. I'm the Assistant Branch Chief for Land Protection at EPD. And to this question about the amount of money that might be outstanding, several years ago, 2015, 2016, Department of Audits did an audit of the Solid Waste Trust Fund, and they looked at this question of distributors versus retailers. And, they suggested it was something that EPD take a look at and whether that would make more sense. So we did at that time do some extensive research. What we decided is that really we would be swapping sort of one set of challenges for another set of challenges. It's not something that we believe is impossible or something we couldn't do to switch to the distributor level, certainly. When audits looked at how much money we might be leaving on the table, for want of a better term, they estimated it more at about 500,000. Certainly there is some level of noncompliance. There always is. And there's some level of new tire sales that are missed in the system. It was not our feeling, and I don't believe it was their feeling, that necessarily changing to the distributor level would change that. When we get to that distributor level, we are dealing with out-of-state entities. But also to the question about how would it work, I can answer that as well. So they would do what retailers do now, which is to register on our website. And then we would ask them to remit those fees to us in the same way that we do retailers currently. Then we would also compare that with the manifest that we receive on the retail level. Because one thing that I think is important to know is that our inspections are not just about making sure that the $1 fee has been paid. That's important. We all want that $1 fee. But it is also about making sure that those tire retailers, whether it's a used retailer or a new retailer, and just, to clarify again, that tire fee is paid on new tires sold in the state. But there are also retailers that deal in used tires. We estimate it's about 4,000 retailers in the state. That's what we know exists. Now, it is a business that people are in and out of, to this question about mom and pops. They pop up, they disappear. So, there's certainly some error in that number, but we believe it's about 4,000. And so it's on that new tire fee sold, but our inspections also require manifesting so that we see it as the prevention part of that scrap tire problem. So we are looking for what has happened to the tires that have been in those locations as well. So were they sold to individuals? If they collected scrap tires back from those individuals,
Which is probably most of the time, correct?
yes. But also, like, for example, if I come in and I get all the tires replaced on my car, then we require them to tell us what happened to those tires, those old tires. What did they do with them? They have to manifest those through the reuse process. In Georgia, we don't allow those tires to be landfilled. So they have to tell us what processor they went to, and we track that via manifest. So it would be the same at the distributor level. You know, we would be looking to match up what the distributors sent us in terms of what they had collected in fees and what they had done with their tires, and then also what the retailers had done with their fees and what they had done with their tires.
So you're going to need to keep up with the retailers regardless.
Yes,
because of the fact the
that's
scrap
right.
tires that come in.
That's exactly right.
Quick question. Do you have, with the fee to be spent on the solid waste trust fund, beginning 100% of the fees, I guess, to be spent, do you have any estimate or broad estimate of the difference between what you think either in an audit or some way has been being collected in the tire fee and what's been appropriated up to this point on an annual basis?
Probably the best source for that information, I'm happy to provide it to y'all directly afterwards, but is those solid waste trust fund reports, because those track annually, you know, how much we have received versus how much was collected. Of course, we haven't yet had that full appropriation to, or that full dedication to EPD. So that is going to be new for us moving forward. But last year, for example, we received about $2.7 million from the solid waste trust fund. And then going forward, we would expect that to be more like $7.5 million.
So you're going to have a significant increase even without any new efficiencies with the distributor, the potential
Yes,
efficiencies with the distributor model.
that's correct.
So that number of 500,000 difference, a lot of that's going to change no matter what. Is that right? Okay. We do have a couple of questions. Vice Chairman Smith.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure who you had a question for, but thanks for.
I figured I better ask a question to either one, since somebody on
Thank
this
you for.
committee may have to carry this bill. And
Yes.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. You mentioned outside distributors. How do you collect from those that are selling into Georgia? Is that an issue, or is it pretty easy? Or
So currently, because we deal with retailers, we don't have that issue, right? Because if somebody, you know, runs a tire shop in Alabama, we don't go over and talk to them. However, we have talked to our staff about what would we do if it went to that distributor level, and we would require them to register with us. So and we would use the retailers as sort of a check on that. So if retailers told us that they were getting their tires from a distributor that was not on our list, we would know that that's a distributor that we needed to contact and make sure that they registered with the state.
Thanks, Chairman. Thanks, Senator. How are you today?
I'm doing
My
well.
friend.
Yeah.
You know, as you mentioned, you know, I do have some heartburn over at the F1 section, but I have a question that came to mind as we were sitting here. Let's say we do, and I understand that this is a suggestion, which I'm not sure I don't necessarily like gray in law, and that a suggestion seems to be a gray area. Let's say this goes through and these innovative, and we push some money towards innovative ideas with taxpayer dollars. Who owns those ideas?
Well, I think it would be the same way that most of the ideas that come out of the communities, the entire state would own those ideas. If the ideas are paid for with public dollars, then the ideas belong to the public, I would think. And you know, we're already doing a little bit of this with some of the funds that are currently in there, as far as individuals are allowed to set up amnesty days and other things and try to come up with innovative ideas to get tires from out of their community and set up. And EPD provides the resources for them to be able to do that, a limited amount of resources. But I think there's already, to a certain degree, some of these innovative ideas. But I think when you're talking about public dollars being spent, I think the ideas belong to the public and would be used throughout the state to address the problem.
And I just would suggest, and it kind of goes back to what my concern of the very, very fine pointed directing of dollars is, say somebody just hits a home run, earth shattering, save the planet, no islands are going underwater the rest of our, you know, somebody is going to own the rights to that, and there's going to be there's potential issue for that.
Well, we hope they would be like the individual that created penicillin. They understood that it belonged to the world and not to them. But I mean, I certainly live in a dark world, but I do believe that sunshine gets through every once in a while. So I hope it would in something like this, to where we're trying to save what I think is the most beautiful state in the United States. So, but I understand your concern. And like I said, that I knew that would be a sticking point and the most controversial part of the legislation. And listen, I have no problem with recommendations from the committee addressing that if it's a sticking point that would prevent this from going in, because I think the most important part of the legislation is the fact that the 15 or whatever the number of inspectors that they have dealing with 4,000 plus retailers would be better used dealing with less than 100 distributors. But I can promise you on this money, we're going to have the same issue we always have if we don't narrowly define what happens, is we're going to have all the corporate hogs that normally come to the trough every time there's state money. And they're the ones that are going to want us to fund ideas that are their ideas that we never have an opportunity not only to own, but to scale and to use for the benefit of the state. Many times those ideas go way beyond the borders of Georgia and into other places that have no impact on our citizens.
Mr. Chairman, if I may follow up, something else that you just sparked, and since the EPD is sitting here, so on the surface, again, I don't necessarily have a lot of contention with the rest of the bill and the collection. I think you did a good job of trying to explain how that would affect them. But if they're still going to be having to deal with the retailers, I sell property for a living. If anybody's interested, 706-254-3251. The retailers, are those 15 people really just adding 100 people to the list as opposed to limiting to 100? And that's the question really for you.
It would add additional inspections. Yeah, so it would add additional places for us to inspect. One thing I didn't address is online retailers, and y'all might be wondering about that. We do track those. We do have a way to track those.
And that's a friendly, I mean, because I'm all for catching every dollar that's going through. I mean, our online sales tax and how we've captured that proves how valuable that can be. So.
And I'll tell you, using the retailer as a checkpoint, I think is good. But as someone who's managed 400 people at a time, there's no way that the low number of inspectors that are currently doing the job are doing the job. They're going out there and trying. And I think they're doing as much as they can do. But I think any of us that own small businesses, big businesses, or anything else know that there's a much more efficient way to increase our bottom line and our margins, then that's what we should do. And when those bottom lines and margins belong to the taxpayers of Georgia, I think we should be as efficient as possible.
One quick question regarding the trust fund. It sounds like there was 2.7 million appropriated in a recent year. It's estimated that 7 to 8 million is what's really coming in, which would now be dedicated to be spent, maybe increasing the inspectors. Is there anything, especially with the new money that may be available, that's not heretofore has not been available? Is there anything in the current code that would prohibit EPD from deciding that tire recycling was something they wanted to put 10% with, even in the absence of this legislation? Or might they even say 20% if they wanted to?
Yeah, no, there's nothing in the code that would
So
prevent that.
you think it's currently in code with the list of priorities of obviously a burning landfill is one thing,
Right.
closing a landfill, glass recycling, aluminum recycling.
Yes.
So EPD will be making the decision with, in particular, with maybe $6 million a year new that will be spent. Is that your understanding?
Yes, the current code section would allow EPD to prioritize those different goals that the state might have that you've described. So emergencies, abandoned landfills, recycling programs, tire programs, the regulatory side of the scrap tire program. So the only thing EPD has really moved on since it became clear that dedicated fees were going to happen. The only new thing that we've done is to hire 2 additional tire inspectors. You know, we felt like we could go ahead and do that expansion. So yes, you've described it perfectly. We would prioritize.
Secretary Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Does the department have a position on this bill?
I am not the head of the department
I'm
and
getting a
he
head
is not
shake.
here.
That's
So
right.
you know,
Zoom connections.
we do what is the will of the legislature and the will of the governor's office.
Well, there's no strong opposition to the bill, or I'm just asking.
I think we have concerns from that prioritization standpoint. So one of the things that happens for us pretty regularly are things, unfortunately, like abandoned landfills, right? Where we don't know that they're there and they're abandoned and they're a problem until they are, and they require sometimes millions of dollars to remediate. So I think we do have concerns about maintaining our ability to prioritize in a way that meets the highest public health and environmental needs of the state.
So is it not true that this landlord couldn't understand how his tenant was able to pay cash rent every month on time until finally went out there and found 600 tires in his backyard? He was charging people, he was charging people $3 to pick them up and haul them off,
Right.
and he was throwing them in the backyard. And so on that note, Senator, I sincerely appreciate you bringing this measure and addressing the problem. It's a plague. I mean, when and it's all over there. Every one of those tires catches water, and the mosquito breeding grounds.
Mhm.
They're hard to find anybody to take them. Nobody will haul them. You can't put them in a haul off dumpster. They're really a plague on us. And I'm thrilled that the legislature's done the dedicated fee and giving you all the resources to whatever program as it moves forward in the future, that y'all are doing your best to keep Georgians safe from all these tires. So
Representative Buck, thank you, sir. Representative Buckner,
Thank
for
you,
whichever.
Mr. Chair. I actually, mine's for EPD. You found a place to go clean up. sounds like.
That's right. We can talk. We can talk.
My question, and part of my question, I think you've answered, but when you were talking about the increase in the funds that you'll have as a result of the dedication of these fees, what priorities do you know of that are going to come first? And then I've got a follow-up question. I mean, how are you going to spend the money that you know is coming?
Sure. So, and I think how we spend the money in the short term is going to be a little bit different than how we spend the money in the long term, if that makes sense. Because
It
there
does.
are some priorities that have not been funded that now we would be able to address. So, you know, as I said, those scrap tire inspectors, that was number one on our list, to put some additional energy behind that regulatory piece. And then additionally, we have some abandoned landfills we're working on. We'll be finishing those up. And then we are looking towards some sort of a broad-based recycling grant program to local governments. So many of you I know are probably familiar with the scrap tire grant program that we operate for local governments that reimburses them for their expenses, either with amnesty days or with cleanup. We have heard very clearly, we had a stakeholder group that met a couple of years ago to talk about, you know, what support do local governments need? They said very clearly they needed help with their local recycling programs. And so our goal is for that to be very broad-based and to meet whatever those local needs are.
When you say broad-based, do you mean like litter, aluminum, glass, ferrous materials, all of it, or are you mainly talking about tires?
So I mean that the tire piece for the cleanup and the amnesty days, that will remain. That has been an extremely successful program for us in terms of getting tires collected before they end up dumped on somebody's property. So that is a very high priority for EPD and will continue. This would add an opportunity for local governments to apply for money related to their curbside program. They could also apply for money related to tires and to reuse and to innovative, you know, we would allow local governments to drive that conversation for us about exactly how they wanted to support their programs, but all of those options would be open and available.
May I follow up?
Sure. Yes, ma'am.
So just for clarity for me,
Mhm.
you already have the authority to be able to do recycling programs with or without the section that's in this bill. Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes,
Thank
it's a part of 12-8-37 is the code section for state grants authorized. And that's where we are able to grant funds to local governments for all of the authorized uses that are a part of the solid waste trust fund.
Chairman Houston.
And I know this collection of the solid waste was started about maybe 12 years ago. And Jay Powell was real instrumental in us making sure that it didn't go to the solid waste trust fund until he just really had a fit and he wanted everything to go to where we said it was going to go when we passed the bill. But how long do you think it'll take before you'll get this thing fully funded to get a lot of money?
So that should start next fiscal year.
Next fiscal year?
Yes,
Okay, so we really don't know what y'all gonna be able to do till you get some money.
that's right.
And, okay. I tell you, one of my, cities that I represent has just done away with their recycling program, and maybe that if they could get a grant, they might could restart it or something. But thank you.
Right, thank you. But were there any others that wanted to speak to the legislation? We didn't really have a sign-up sheet, so would the author like to
Mr.
maybe give
Chairman,
us a summary?
no, so Mr.
This is a
Chairman,
hearing
real
only
quick.
at this time, but
Right, and I just got a
appreciate it.
text message from another chairman in the House saying I better get to her meeting. So I'm on, I'm gonna head that way. But no, sir, I think the motive in this legislation is extremely clear. It makes it more efficient. I think our citizens will be better served with a clear understanding exactly that this money is being collected, like Chairman Powell wanted it to be collected and to be spent in the manner in which it was supposed to be spent. So I look forward to any help, consideration, and advice in moving forward. And I thank you and the committee for their time.
Thank you for the legislation.
Thank you, sir.
And there being no other business, I believe subcommittee is adjourned. Thank you all for being here and thank you for participating. Yes.